This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me, our Falcons analyst, Jarvis Davis, and Locked On Falcons host, Aaron Freeman. The Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So 18 may have found a new home, but is it enough for the Falcons to relocate? And we'll discuss. And are the five guys in the room enough? We'll unpack that. Also, does that guy fit in with this team? We'll talk about that as well. And 18's coming to the big screen, but do you care? We'll download on it. But first, let's talk about a free agency move this week and whether or not it changes any moves that will be made in a month. So Jarvis safety Jordan Fuller has signed with the Falcons. Fuller has 55 career starts over 5 seasons with Rams and Panthers. So, of course, that reunites him with his old Rams DC, Raheem Morris. But what does that mean? What does this signing mean for Jeff Ulbricht's defense?
I mean, I think you can at least pencil him in as a starter because there was a big behind hole right there at strong safety spot because, you know, with Justin Simmons, I'm assuming he's not coming back at this point. Before the sign, I was thinking that, and I was thinking that, you know, with him, Jordan Fuller coming in, it gives you that starting safety. It gives you a guy who has some experience because as much as I like DeMarco Hellams, I don't think he should be coming in as the starter, you know, so to speak. I think he's a guy that can be a depth piece for you, that you can use him in spots and for certain situations when you're trying to switch things up a little bit as maybe that third safety potentially. But this is something that I feel like is going to give Jeff Ulbricht a little bit more comfort when it comes to who do I have right now that has experience and that can kind of give me a little bit of peace of mind at that safety spot.
And for you, Aaron, when you look at this signing of Jordan Fuller, what does that mean to you? What do you think it brings to Jeff Ulbricht's secondary?
Well, I think it's interesting that we're calling it Jeff Ulbricht secondary because I think this move really kind of signals that it's still Raheem Morris's secondary because you've seen a lot of the agents, whether it's Leonard Floyd or now Jordan Fuller, that have that experience playing under Raheem Morris in the past in LA. And so like I do feel like with Jordan Fuller, when you look at his time in LA, those 3 seasons he played under Raheem Morris when he was the defensive coordinator there, those were 3 solid seasons for Jordan Fuller. Like the only real knock on Jordan Fuller during that time was his inability to stay healthy. And that I think is right now the biggest question with Jordan Fuller. Can he stay healthy? But the good thing is when you look at his history, like he seems to get hurt in even years and he seems to stay healthy in odd years. And last I checked, 2025 is an odd year. So that bodes well for this. But I think what Jordan Fuller brings to the table is what a lot of these Falcons free agent signings are bringing to the table, which is a floor for what you can expect them to be. Not necessarily maybe the high ceiling that I think a lot of us went into the offseason hoping that the Falcons would add players like that, but guys that sort of establish a floor, more known commodities, have proven production in this league, which I think is, you know, getting to the point that Jarvis said, like you might be, you know, intrigued by what the potential of DeMarco Hellams could be in this defense, but you don't really know what the floor is. We've basically seen him start 7 games in Atlanta and, you know, showed some promise in those games, but you don't know what he's going to be like coming off the injury that caused him to miss all of last year. And so I think Jordan Fuller brings, you know, experience, he brings maturity, he brings leadership. That was one of the things that were noted of Jordan Fuller when he was playing under Raheem Morris. He even wore the green dot in 2021, calling the defense. So you get a smart player that understands the ins and outs of at least the Raheem Morris scheme. We'll see what, you know, the Jeff Ulbricht influence brings to the table, but I think that's really what you're looking for with Jordan Fuller.
Yeah, I think you make a great point there. If we look at just kind of rounding out the secondary room with AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates III, Mike Hughes, I think that is a nice piece, adding Jordan Fuller, someone who, as you mentioned, is familiar with a Raheem Morris-led defense, which this is probably going to still be a defense that is influenced by Raheem Morris and of course, with Jeff Ulbricht's input. But ultimately speaking, it does start to feel like I'll say this, and I'm of course using the term loosely, but it does sort of feel like a Rams 2.0 or a Rams South, if you will. But again, using that term loosely because we don't know at this point whether or not it's going to turn into what the real Rams defense has turned into for the last couple of years. But that said, you look at that signing, and that was one of those where we were saying, okay, obviously didn't want the Falcons to necessarily go after a safety in the first round, although I think everybody would have been on in some way, shape, or form okay with the Falcons going secondary in some way, shape, or form for the first round. But I think too, when you look at the second round, fourth, probably didn't want to touch it in the seventh round, but at least the first and the fourth round, there could have been a possibility there. So that said, Aaron, do you feel like this move is actually going to be a move that dictates what the Falcons do come draft time? Is this taking the safety off the board? Is this making the safety position maybe not as much as a priority, or is it still on the board and a priority?
Well, I think it's still on the board. They still need another body in that safety room because right now they just basically have three safeties unless you count Benny Sapp. No offense to Benny Sapp, but I don't think many people know who Benny Sapp is that are listening or watching us right now. So I do think there's an opportunity for the Falcons to find another safety, their own version of DeMarco Hellams at some point in the draft that they can develop in time. So I still think safety will be a position that the Falcons could wind up selecting, but I do think this does indicate that it's probably not going to be as big a priority as some of the other positions that I think are a little bit more pressing to get bodies at. D tackle, edge rusher, nickel cornerback. Those are some of those positions that I feel like right now, like you could plug and play right now with a first round pick that could come in day one and be a starter, given the holes that the Falcons have currently at that position. I think the presence of Jordan Fuller means that that player, whether it's a Malaki Starks, whether it's a Nick Emanwari out of South Carolina, is less likely to come in and be an immediate starter, given what we're talking about with Jordan Fuller, his knowledge of the defense and whatnot, and sort of that's going to be the part that a rookie is going to struggle with, at least initially here. And so I think it gives the Falcons the flexibility to wait on a safety, whether that's, round 2, round 4, round 7, or something like that. I think that's really what this move does. It just means that, okay, this is still a position that we would like to address, but we don't necessarily have to feel, like we have to press and pull the trigger on that guy in the first round or the second round or something like that.
Yeah, I think it does speak to exactly what you're saying, Free. It's the sense of urgency because you still have so many other holes that precede the need to fill that position at safety. Obviously, looking up front, obviously, even if you had to, maybe going on the offensive side of the ball, on the O-line, if you will. So, yeah, you just have more pressing needs. And if you can get a guy like this who is a known commodity, then it probably bodes well to keep that, kind of pull that pressure off of the Falcons as far as where they're going to go in the draft. And for you, Jarvis, when you look at the signing of Fuller, do you feel the same? Like that's a position that at least, not that the Falcons can't still go, especially because we're going to talk about this a little bit later, they may actually mess around and get a pick back. So, but we'll talk about it in a moment. But ultimately speaking, with the picks that they do have, do you feel like this kind of takes a little bit of pressure off them feeling like, hey, we've got to go out and get this position filled in that first or even that fourth round?
To me, I believe this is a move that kind of put things in perspective, right? Because I understand that if I'm projecting out, safety makes sense, right? Because, who knows how long Jesse Bates is going to be able to play. He's expensive. You're still trying to rework this defense and actually have some foundational pieces for the future, right? You have to think about that, even though, like you said, that sense of urgency is very high right now for this front office. So, and they have to get an edge rusher in here. So I think that this signing, obviously the familiarity with the defense, like Free brought up with Raheem Morris' scheme and everything like that, I feel like this is something that you have to put in place just in case, because you don't know how things going to fall in the draft. Because what if Mike Green, Michael Williams, Jalen Walker, all those cats off the board? What you gonna do? you know, and you might get a phone call and say, hey, we want to offer you a 2nd round pick or a 3rd round pick to move back to 22. You know, and you might take a look at a guy like Donovan Ezeraku, you know, out of Boston College. So all of those things, I feel like this move is kind of like signifies them saying, okay, let's go and get this in place, and we can move forward and understand that this is not necessarily a need because we have so many other needs on the defensive side of the football.
So, Free, with the secondary room as currently constructed, would you be comfortable if this is where the Falcons kind of stop as far as what they've done to round out that room? Or do you still want to see them make a move in for the draft to maybe shore up that room, or maybe even add some competition for some of those positions? Not all of them, obviously. AJ Terrell, Jesse Bates are good to go. But in other words, for the secondary room to round out, are you good with where it is now?
No, I think they still need some help.
Okay.
I think you can get another safety in here for at least depth, if not to potentially push someone like a Jordan Fuller for a starting job. I think you have a big hole at nickel cornerback right now. I don't, necessarily look at guys like Clark Phillips and Natron Brooks and, Mike Ford and Keith Taylor as viable options at that spot as we sit here today. You still have to play the Minnesota Vikings again this year. And we saw what happened the last time the secondary faced the Minnesota Vikings. You haven't, like we sit here and we talked about it then, talk about it now, but like you feel good about AJ Terrell and Justin Jefferson, but who's covering Jordan Addison, right? You still don't have a Jordan Addison problem solver. So I feel like cornerback right now is still a priority position that you need to, whether it's finding a guy that you can trust that has the size, the physicality to deal with guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin in Tampa Bay, or a guy that can deal with the speed of Jordan Addison, or, a guy that can come in and play nickel. But like, I feel like cornerback, we talked about it all season long. That was a problem area for this defense when they faced teams that had multiple good wide receivers. That it's like you're comfortable with AJ Terrell. Mike Hughes did as admirable a job as anybody thought he would do, and thus earned a second contract with this Falcons team. But I think you still need there's a lot of room to grow in that cornerback room as we sit here today. So I think the secondary still needs a lot of help.
And that's not to mention what we're seeing, not just, you mentioned Free, the Minnesota Vikings, but you got to get out of your own division. I mean, Chris Godwin is back. Mike Evans is back. So, yeah, I think that's a great point that you make. The issue really, really showed itself, and it was glaring with the Vikings, but you also have some issues that you have to deal with and some challenges with this secondary within the division.
Yeah. I mean, I was just going to back up what you said, T. I think that the way Chris Godwin has played against the Falcons kind of like really brings out what Freeze just said. Like, they could probably handle, the number one guy with AJ Terrell. We can kind of figure that out. I'm cool with that, that type of matchup. But oh my gosh, that second guy, Chris Godwin, used to eat, line that man up in the slot, man. Oh my gosh, they can go crazy. And we understand how many teams are here in 11 personnel, a lot. So that nickel corner is just as important as that backside corner, it's specifically in this defense in 2025.
Yeah. I think that, I have to agree with you guys. When we look at, and really just the NFL as a whole, when we're looking at what teams are doing as far as like stacking it, you can't just stop at, hey, we got someone who can defend that wide receiver 1. No, you've got to go into wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 and make sure that you're shored up, especially because you don't want to get into a situation where I think this is a Falcons offense, granted, that definitely will be able to run up the scoreboard. Unfortunately, without a Rondale Moore, but I do think that this is a Falcons team that can run up the scoreboard. But on the same token, I don't think you still want to get into a track meet because the wide receivers are putting the opponent in position for it to be a track meet. So, yeah, I agree with you guys. I think this is a nice addition to the secondary room in Jordan Fuller. But ultimately speaking, I don't think this is where the Falcons want to stop as far as how they round out that secondary room and bringing some more support to pass defense. Now, speaking of passing, 18 may have found a new home, but is it enough for the Falcons to relocate him? We'll take that under further review. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project on a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. So if you need help, for example, with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. And fast and easy hiring is what they're known for. Posting a job is pretty free and simple. And within a day, you'll have multiple qualified candidates to choose from. So visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. It's cost-effective growth because instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. So that's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money using code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So guys, can you believe that we are finally having a conversation where there may be a parting of the ways with Kirk Cousins? According to NFL insider, also known as Jarvis Davis's favorite sports reporter, Josina Anderson, the Falcons have been taking calls on Kirk Cousins, and there have been conversations centered around a third-round pick as compensation. So for you, Free, first off, a third-round pick for a team that currently doesn't have one, is that enough compensation for this Falcons team to move on from Kirk Cousins?
Yes, I would say. If look,
quite frankly,
you really feel free.
No offense to Josina Anderson, but I feel like if someone legitimately offered a third-round pick, this trade would have been done yesterday. That basically Terry would have been like, no takebacks. You said third. I heard third. No takebacks. Send it in. Send the facts in. It's official. You're done. Yes. Like that. There's no negotiation at that point in time. You said what they said. So, Josina does great work, so I just have a hard time buying that someone is offering that right now. So I feel like it was probably mentioned on the phone, but we'll see. So yes, I will. But all that to say is, like, if the Falcons could get a third-round pick for Kirk Cousins at this point, you take that all day, every day. It's like you promise to pay that GM's kids' college tuition fees, whatever you got to do to make sure that deal happens. So I think if the Falcons can get a third for Kirk Cousins at this stage, then it's a huge coup for Terry Fontenot, the much maligned general manager, Terry Fontenot, at least if you listen to Locked On Falcons.
Well, you know what? Free, he's not maligned by himself. The guy that's actually looking to partner with him is also much maligned right now, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers GM Omar Khan, because they can't figure out how to figure it out for a guy under center. So we always talked about this, Jarvis, that if there would be a partner, it was probably going to be a team that at some point started to feel desperate. And right now, somewhat that's the Steelers. I won't say like full-blown desperation for the Steelers, but there is a level of frustration. Justin Fields has moved on to the New York Jets. Russell Wilson is entertaining other offers. Aaron Rodgers is skipping through the tulips and saying, yeah, I'll get back to you when I get back to you. And they're, as always, middling as far as their first-round pick. So unless they go with someone like the likes of Jackson Dart, and to be honest with you, I think the Steelers are a little nervous about that because they're afraid to have a Kenny Pickett 2.0. All of those things. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. After Jackson Dart, and what you've seen out of the QB1 for the Steelers since Ben Roethlisberger's departure. The reason I'm mentioning all of that, Jarvis, is because those are the perfect storm conditions that we figured had to happen for a team to be that desperate to say, hey, we'll give you a 3rd round pick if we could have Kirk Cousins. So to Free's point, not necessarily breaking for what Josina is saying about a 3rd round pick. Yeah, Terry, you probably should have taken that yesterday if that's what came to you. But it might be viable just because the Steelers, Jarvis, remain one of those teams that's sort of in limbo where they have everything else pretty much in place on their offensive side of the ball, except the guy who's going to throw the damn ball.
Yeah, I think that is – I think Aaron Rodgers – I think bringing up Aaron Rodgers – is kind of like a chess piece that's unknown. So when you talk about experienced quarterback, I know that if he's healthy, he's going to be able to at least give me something. Like Free talked about earlier about raising the floor. Like you bring a guy, if you're looking at a guy like Aaron Rodgers, I know that's going to raise my floor. And then outside of being injured, Kirk Cousins, he raises your floor as well, and he's younger. So I feel like if we're in a space where you have a team like the Steelers where they're quote unquote a quarterback away from being contenders, right? I put that in air quotes to you. I know you gonna help me raise those air quotes for on my side over here, but I think that is something that Terry Fontenot can take advantage of. Is it 3rd round pick worthy? I don't know. That seems pretty rich, and I think it's very interesting that third round pick came around and the Falcons don't have one, like you mentioned. Okay, all right. So I guess they're going to get a 3rd and a 5th round pick too, right? hey, Kirk, I need you to get that 5th round pick back that you actually gave away because you're up here running your mouth. You got diarrhea of the mouth. So I think all in all, if this report is true, right? Like I said, I'm not questioning Josina. I got a little
Josina. He doesn't want to question his favorite.
Time ago, you know what I'm saying? Some time ago, you know what I'm saying? I kind of fallen off that, you know what I'm saying? I was young, you know what I'm saying? I didn't really know where I was going, in my life, So I'm cool now. I'm cool on. I'm cool. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I got older and wiser. You know what I'm saying?
And wiser.
But so if this report is true, I feel like this can work out in Terry Fontenot's favor. Oh my gosh, you talking about letting Terry cook? We talked about that on Monday. Oh my gosh, if this dude messes around and get a 3rd round pick for Kirk Cousins, man, this dude's gonna get a lot of favor. He's gonna gain a lot of favor in a lot of people's eyes, including me, because I did not see that coming. If that happens,
and I thought it was possible. I just didn't see it coming this soon. I thought it was going to be a little bit further down the road where a team really felt like they were over a barrel and absolutely couldn't do anything but say, hey, I got to give you something that's going to give me a quarterback that's somewhat viable. But like I said, the Steelers are pretty darn close to over a barrel when it comes to that quarterback position. I don't know if any team other than through injury is going to be in as much of a precarious situation. So yeah, if Josina's right, like you guys said, Terry has to pull the trigger. I mean, he has to pull the trigger. And I think you guys would agree as well that a move like this, taking nothing away from getting a Fuller or anyone else, a Leonard Floyd or anyone else that the Falcons have acquired in free agency, but this would be the crowning jewel of free agency because no matter what you did in free agency, everybody's question Free was, but can you move 18? Can you do something about 18?
Yeah. I mean, that's been kind of the frustrating aspect of this offseason is like the most interesting thing that the Falcons have done and or will do is trading Kirk Cousins. How will they, won't they, can they, can't they? Yeah, it's like how do they get rid of Kirk Cousins? Do they cut him? Do they trade him? What type of trade pick? And it's like it's disappointing because that's the headline for the Falcons offseason. But that headline looks much better if you can find a way to get an early round pick like Josina Anderson is reporting that the Falcons could.
Yeah, this is going to be very interesting. Like Free said, it's so weird to me that the biggest story of the offseason for the Falcons would be a trade of Kirk Cousins, not them making a big splashy pick to try to get X player or trying to get Trey Hendrickson, which is all but not going to happen anymore, or them, bringing back or cutting Grady Jarrett. That's a big deal. This man has been a stalwart in this organization for 10 years and has given so much, taking so many double and triple teams because the Falcons refused to bring someone in here to kind of gain some attention so he can kind of work his magic a little bit. But yeah, this is like Terry better work his magic when it comes to this particular story. And like I said, if it's a 3rd round pick, I will say it again, man. Well, you might just save your job if you're able to get that type of conversation, essentially.
Okay, so for kicks and giggles, and I say it in jest, but I actually do mean it a little bit. When we thought that there was no chance that the Falcons would move Kirk Cousins or move him anytime soon, Aaron, the thought was, well, if nothing else, you got yourself a quality quarterback because, okay, the reality is Michael Penix Jr. has been a guy who's had some injury concerns, if you will, and if for no other reason, Kirk Cousins will be going into that 2nd year coming off the Achilles injury, so he'll be, quote unquote, a little bit closer to his Kirk Cousins self, coupled with the fact that you just kind of never know worst case scenario if something happens to Michael Penix Jr. But that said, if you lose a Kirk Cousins and he moves on, the reality is maybe not as much the 24 season, but we know what happened in that 23 season. Half the teams in the league had to put their QB2 into QB1 mode. Some teams had to go to QB3. Hell, some teams had to go to 4 and 5, Cleveland Browns. But ultimately speaking, just out of curiosity, where would you then go if the quality QB2 is no longer there for the Falcons? Because that is actually still a viable need, all things considered, for what I just said.
Yeah, that's always been the interesting thing about the Falcons keeping Kirk Cousins, because I think a lot of people have been like, well, he'll be the best backup quarterback in the league. And it's like, but if the Falcons are trying to move him, like if the Falcons get what they want, he's not going to be here. So you're going to need to still go out there, even as you're negotiating a trade, you still need to go out there and find another backup quarterback that whenever you move Kirk Cousins, whether it's in the coming days, weeks, or several months from now, you need to have that guy ready to go. You don't want to be sitting here scrambling, similar to what the Falcons were last summer when they traded Taylor Heinicke, and it's like, oh, it's not a big deal, it's a QB3, and then you're stuck with Nathan Peterman, and it's like, all right, thank God we have Michael Penix, because boy, if they had to turn to Nathan Peterman as their backup quarterback, that would have been a problem. So you don't want to be settling for the Nathan Petermans of the world. Shout out to the Pitt legend, but you need to have somebody in your building. And when we were going through this early in the offseason, thinking about, because Kirk wasn't going to be here after a certain point, we talked about guys like Jameis Winston and Jacoby Brissett and Case Keenum, and Brissett's off the market, but there are still some guys out there that make sense for the Falcons as backup quarterbacks, including some of those guys I just named. So, you have opportunities to find, viable backups that you can plug and play with that are happy to work in Atlanta, unlike, a current backup quarterback for the Falcons.
Yeah. Give me Teddy Bridgewater. See what he's doing. He signed on towards the end of the year after winning the state championship down there in Florida, man, down in the bottom. Hey, man, you want to be a backup? Want to be essentially another coach in the room?
Yeah.
For a guy like Michael Penix Jr., like drop a little knowledge on him. Yeah, I would bring a guy like that in, because like that's the one thing about this league, right? There are always going to be guys that are older, a little long in the tooth, and still trying to stay on and find a job and be able to be of service to a young quarterback, willing to kind of give them the lay of the land, so to speak, what to expect on each and every Sunday. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be concerned at all if Kirk gets that. He goes from being the best backup quarterback and to not having a backup quarterback and having to go out and sign one. Yeah, I'm cool with that. I have no problem with that whatsoever, because there are several guys, like I just mentioned, that are out there ready and willing. Like, I'll even think about signing famous Jameis as well. I mean, shoot, for kicks and giggles.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's out there campaigning, so
Yes.
definitely wouldn't be a bad thing. But speaking of several guys, there are 5 guys in a particular position group, but are the 5 guys in that room enough? We'll unpack that in Next Up. So Jarvis, Terry Fontenot decided to bring back Taquan Graham, decided to bring back Kentavious Street. David Onyemata is returning as well. Then you got Rucororo and Brandon Dorless kind of rounding out that D-line core as guys going into their second year. So when you look at those decisions, particularly who the Falcons brought back, who they decided to keep, the guys that you're looking to see improve, especially maybe, and seeing them hopefully healthy for a full season, for you, are the Falcons done? Are you good with them being done, adding to that group? Should they be done?
If I'm speaking from Terry Fontenot's perspective, I'm probably done, right? Because I believe in Rucororo and being a second-round pick, and he potentially hopping in there to be that starting guy in my defense, and potentially or eventually replace or make people forget about Grady Jarrett. I know that's saying a lot, but I think that's if you are a general manager, you draft a guy that high, those guys are drafted to be starters, right? Like Arnie Ebiketie was drafted in the second round. He still isn't starter caliber to me in my eyes. So from my perspective, no, they shouldn't be done. I think that you should continue to add to this room, right? And I'm not saying that you should add in the first round or even the second round, but if there's a guy in that fourth round that can come in and potentially have an immediate impact on your defense side of the football that plays down in the trenches, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you bring guys like that in, because the more bodies you have that can actually be productive for you, the more chance you have of this defense being that mid-tier defense. That's all I ask. If they can get to that 15, 16 ranked defense in points per game, I'm being very specific right now, T. I'm speaking into existence. If they can get to that 15, 16 as far as points per game or points given up, I am banking on this offense putting up 26, 27 points a game and being that team to kind of lead you to the playoffs. And we know that that's the Falcons' goal. And if they make it to the playoffs, if the Falcons are in the playoffs in the end of the year, or they're right there leading the NFC South going into December and January, it's because Michael Penix came out here and did exactly what they expected him to do when they took him 8th overall for the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, I think I like the way Jarvis put that. Like, if I'm Terry Fontenot, I may be done. But if I'm Jarvis Davis, I don't think we should be done. So I'll pose the same to you, Aaron. If you're Terry Fontenot, are you done? If you're Aaron Freeman, should you be done?
My answer is no to both of these questions. Like, to me, the idea that Terry will look at this D-line group and be like, we're good. I'm like, what? Obviously I have but like you bring back Taquan Graham and Kentavious Street, two sort of back-end rotational players. You bring in Morgan Fox, who's a pass rush specialist who has historically struggled to stop the run to the point that most teams do not ask him to play early down situations. You had David Onyemata, who was a very good run plugger for years and years, but took a big step back last year. You lose Eddie Goldman, you lose Grady Jarrett. Like, how, we obviously expect the pass rush juice to come from the outside with guys like Arnold Ebiketie and the first round pick and Leonard Floyd and whatnot. And it's not to say that this interior group can't provide some pressure up the middle, but like what their job is supposed to do is stuff the run. And I think you got to get somebody in this building that is a wide body that can be that sort of black hole against the run to clog up the middle. Like right now, like Kentavious Street is your nose tackle. LaCale London is your nose tackle. Like, that's not a good place to be if you're the Atlanta Falcons, if you expect to be able to stop the run. And we watched team after team, game after game last year where teams just pounded the ball down the Falcons' throat and just basically was like, we're just going to run at you between the tackles. And the Falcons really never stopped anybody from doing that. It was just basically like, it was just, easy yards and whatnot. So if I say that, so if Terry Fontenot's looking at this group and wiping his hands like, yep, we did it, guys. I'm just like, Terry, like, what are we doing? Like, again, I know you might get a coup with that Kirk Cousins trade, but like you gotta put something more in there, some beef up the middle to really help solve these problems. Again, it goes back to what we're talking about with the secondary. Like, there are issues that were on film last year, and you have not done enough so far to address those issues to prevent those things from happening again. What's going to stop some of these teams from just running it down your throat again? You haven't really done anything to solve that problem. So to me, whether it's the free agency, whether it's the draft, you got to get some beef. There's got to be a 320-pounder out there that can come in and help this team stop the run.
So having a Zach Harrison in that mix, somebody who is, I want to say, trending up, right? We'll say, okay, good on run as a run defender, coming up as a pass defender. But I think you make a great point, Free, but I'll circle it back to you, Jarvis. When we look at that room as currently constructed with all of those pieces in there, we feel like, hey, at the end of the day, the job can't be done. It shouldn't be done because, to your point, yes, it'd be great to be middling in the middle of the pack, because middling to me is a negative connotation. So I'll say middle of the pack as far as that defense goes with points per game. But on the same token, I feel like I want to see him be a little bit better than just middle of the pack, because I still want to take some of the pressure off of that offense, at least from time to time. Maybe not every single game, but at least from time to time. I do want to see the defense be the reason the Falcons win a game versus putting all that pressure on that offense all the time, which to me does mean, like you guys are saying, Terry Fontenot shouldn't be finished by any stretch of the imagination with rounding out that room with a game changer, because I don't think I've really heard from what you guys have said so far a game changer like to take you through an entire season. All of these guys have shown flashes, and all of these guys have shown flashes on one side of the ball or the other, whether that's run defense or pass defense. But it sounds to me like, no, you still need to get somebody who can be a game changer or a game wrecker, or when you just need one play to close a game out, like we saw in those last two games of the season last season, then he still needs to go out and look for that guy.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what we've been begging for the past 7 years. A difference maker, a game changer. What you've been bringing in on the offensive side of the football.
Yes.
Bijan Robinson. Can I get the Bijan Robinson at edge rusher? That level of talent, that level of being a difference maker, that level of attention that people are going to pay towards him, before pre-snap. Yeah, can we get that level of talent? Yeah, that's what they need to bring in, because I feel like bring guys like Street and Graham, and having guys like Zach Harrison and hopefully Rukaroro and Brandon Doyle, and those guys start to come through. Those guys are, you see flash from every now and then. Then when you couple that with a guy who is going to have an immediate impact as soon as he lines up in his first day or first game, he's going to be a difference maker. You're going to see the difference in his defense. That's when you start to see that climb, right? That's when you start to see those sacks increase, total sacks increase, those TFLs increase. And that's when you start to force turnovers. And once you start to get turnovers, that's how you help that offense. That's how you don't put as much pressure on them, because they don't have to go 75 yards every time they get the doggone football. Or you line it up at the plus 20, right? And going in. So those are some of the things that can help your defense once you bring that big boy impact type guy, and not depend on him to do it all on himself. But you have some guys that can flash from time to time to kind of help couple that with the guy is going to be consistently putting pressure on the quarterback. Because one thing about putting pressure on the quarterback, it solves a lot of issues. And I think that, if you're talking about helping out your offense, with on a weekly basis, getting sacks, getting TFLs, forcing fumbles, interceptions, those are going to lead to short fields. That's going to help your offense out tremendously. And then we'll see the vision that you had by taking 3 or 4 consecutive offensive players in the first round of the draft since you've been here.
Yeah, I would just say, like, the Falcons have some young talent that has potential to develop. but they need more young talent with more potential to develop in that D-line room. So I certainly think they can't rest on their laurels, right? You want to have that deep rotation, that strong rotation. And right now they're working towards that, but the job's not done.
Yeah, I agree. And so there's a guy, you guys are talking about game changers, right? There's a guy who could be a game changer, but will his ethos eliminate the possibility and the chance for him to be that for the Falcons? We'll discuss coming up next. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Now, Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. Monarch Money is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When you start using Monarch, you realize how much you're spending on things like food delivery, so you can budget smarter and save more. And instead of juggling multiple apps and trying to figure out, okay, which app am I going to deal with for my investments and which am I going to deal with for just banking, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Remember, managing money with your partner can be smoother than ever because you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without stress by going to monarchmoney.com using code LOCKEDONNFL and saving 50% off for your first year at monarchmoney.com.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
So guys, when you think about the fact that this is a conversation we keep having over and over and over again, ethos, this whole concept of the kind of environment, the kind of space, the kind of individual that the Falcons want in their space, right? So there's a guy, Mike Green, that mock drafts, ESPN's mock draft specialist, Mel Kiper, has going to the Falcons at 15. Now, Aaron, he makes sense for the Falcons from a position perspective, but some people are concerned about him making a difference and making sense from an ethos perspective. For you, does this Falcons ethos concept then eliminate Green from the board altogether? That's my part one. But my part two is, are you concerned that it could even eliminate some other guys in this draft who could be very, very viable, as Jarvis mentioned earlier, to be able to contribute from their first snap?
I don't know the answer, T. I think with Mike Green, because of the severity of the allegations against him, and nothing has been sort of charged against him or anything like that, but because you have two instances of alleged sexual assault, that's not the same thing as I think where I think for me, I think a lot of this Falcons ethos conversation and like the filter or whatever you want to say, I think a lot of that stems from, that FOMO, that fear of missing out from Jalen Carter. And I think you can't just sort of be like, oh, we missed out on Jalen Carter, and so therefore we need to go get more Jalen Carters. Jalen Carters do not grow on trees. You'll probably go another 12 years without having a Jalen Carter. And not to make light of the tragic events surrounding Jalen Carter, but you can more easily dismiss what happened with Jalen Carter as some young people making some dumb, drunk decisions on a night that they shouldn't have.
Yes.
Sure. I don't know if you can just look at the situation with Mike Green and just sort of dismiss it in a similar light. So I think you as an organization have to do your due diligence. I think with the Atlanta Falcons, historically, when they have been willing to make bets on guys that didn't necessarily have the sort of plus character guys. I think of players like Rashid Hageman and Prince Shimbo and Jalen Collins. They haven't had a lot of success hitting on those guys. And, you know, when you look at a situation where, you know, you go back to Michael Vick, right? Where Arthur Blank asked Michael Vick, did you do the dogfighting? And Michael Vick said no. And then you find out later, Michael Vick lied to you. When you look at the Deshaun Watson situation, where the Falcons clearly, after he was cleared of criminal charges, despite having a billion civil lawsuits against them, the Falcons were all in on that. But, you know, it's one of those things where, like, I feel like when it comes to the Falcons going after players that have some of these question marks, they historically have not done a good job of being able to identify the right guys, the right bets to make. And so that gives me a little bit more pause for the Falcons to go after some of these guys that we're talking about. And it's like, I don't really trust this team to be able to make the right decisions on those things. But I certainly do think that when you look at this team, yes, there are players in this draft that probably would not necessarily traditionally pass that filter, that are really good football players. And so I do feel like the Falcons need to be willing to take chances on those players. But at the same time, this is not a team like, you know, Andy Reid in Kansas City and in Philadelphia historically was much more willing to look past some of these transgressions. Players like Tyreek Hill and Kareem Hunt that had issues before they got to the league. But despite having some issues when they got in the league, the thing is that you notice with those guys is, like, you think about them as football players first and foremost. Sure. That Andy Reid has a 20 plus year track record of being able to get those guys in his building and keep them controlled or whatnot. And the Falcons don't have that. And so I don't think it's simply a switch that you can flip and suddenly, hey, we drafted this guy and he's going to instantly be that impact player in Atlanta, and we're not going to have to worry about any of these off-field issues. So I do feel like there needs to be a shift, but at the same time, I don't feel like it's just simply, oh, we flip a switch and we'll just bring a bunch of a-holes into the building and suddenly we'll, be winning 13, 14 games a year. I think it's not as simple as I think some people like to suggest it is.
And Jarvis, can I just piggyback on what Aaron just said, kind of taking it in the direction we were going to go in, but just slightly different. Okay. I do think that there are people in the world, and this is no offense to Terry Fontenot, Raheem Morris, or Arthur Blank, but I do think that there are people who just have the ability to deal with less than perfect situations, less than perfect individuals, and make it work. And Aaron hit the nail on the head. My mind went to Andy Reid. My mind went to Mike Tomlin. My mind went to Howard Roseman, just in, football lore alone, if you will. And think about all the things we found out about players after the fact, especially with Mike Tomlin, and oh my God, how he had to deal with Antonio Brown and what the real deal was, or with Ben Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, etc. He's able to keep all of that stuff contained, if you will. Andy Reid being able to figure out, okay, that's the guy that I do want to take a chance on. Michael Vick, Tyreek Hill, Kareem Hunt, bringing him back. So you think about those individuals who have the ability to say, you don't perfectly fit the ethos of the Eagles, the Steelers, or the Chiefs, but I think I have the ability to help you get on the right track, keep things in check, and just help you to focus on the football. I think Aaron might be onto something. I don't know that kind of exists in the Falcons building, that there's somebody who could say, hey, a Mike Green, for all of the very, very strong allegations against you, we can take a chance on you. And if they're not true, but you still put yourself in those kind of situations, we can teach you how not to be in those situations and just focus on football. I think Aaron's right. I don't know that this is the organization that has a good track record with dealing with picking the people who have these issues, and then B, for it actually working out in their favor, because those people don't do any bad things anymore and they actually show up on the field and do some good things.
You have to start somewhere, though. You have to engage. And one thing, this is coming from a guy, I've made some dumb decisions in my life. I know that may be shocking to both of you all and everybody who's listening and watching right now, but I've made some stupid decisions. And when I was able to learn from those decisions, I was able to talk about it. So for Mike Green to be able to answer questions at the podium,
yes,
I don't know if I remember someone, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember people talking about their allegations or what happened to them in college to the media. This man was talking about this stuff to the media, the public. It was just like, all right, cool. I'm gonna answer that question and whatever.
Yeah.
Most of the times you're answering those in those meetings, those 15 to 20-minute meetings with the teams specifically, right? And over again, because they know about it. They've done their research. So I feel like in order for the Falcons to kind of change the mind of you all, and I'm in agreement with you all, they don't deal with those guys well. You see what happened when Rashid came in here. Oh my gosh. It didn't look pretty, and Jalen Collins as well. So but you can't let that continue to be. You have to engage at some point. You have to say, okay, all right, we've been taking these guys off the board in the past. We don't even consider them. Like, you can't afford to do that anymore. So you're going to have to engage with those guys, come up with a plan for those guys. If you feel after talking with them and engaging with them, having those real look me in my eye conversations, that's what it's going to take. And once you have those conversations, then you have to say, okay, what do I get from this conversation? Okay, here's what he said in response to this. How do I feel when he said that? And do I feel like this is a guy who's moved on from that? Do I feel like this is a guy who's learned from that situation? So until you start having those conversations, you're going to continue to have these issues with these certain type of players, and you're going to continue to be without on Sundays when you need players like that to come through for you. So yeah, it can't end at, oh, well, you guys don't know how to deal with those type of players, so we're going to just kind of go with the all hunky-dory guys, the safe guys. No, it don't work like that. I'm sorry. Like, when it comes to building a locker room, you have a whole bunch of group of guys that have different political affiliations. They believe in so many different things that you believe in. It's just how football locker rooms are built, and the successful ones have a combination of all common type guys. So yeah, you can't continue to live in that space if you want to truly compete. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you can't live in that space. I just don't know if the organization as currently constructed has the people in place to help you to actually get out of that space and start at such a high bar of issue as what Mike Green is dealing with. I think if we were talking about maybe some more minor issues, maybe I would trust them, even trust Raheem Morris, but I don't know. The Mike Green stuff is a little bit different. I think, like you said, Dalvin Cook is the only person who comes to mind for me where maybe there would have been some conversation at the podium. But yeah, I applaud Mike Green for that. I just don't know if, as currently constructed, there are the people in place who can help the Falcons to walk through that situation. At any rate, 18 is coming to the big screen. Him and all his challenges. But do you care? When we come back, we'll chop it up about 18 on the big screen. So guys, Kirk Cousins is set to be a part of season 2 of the Netflix series Quarterback. He's one of the quarterbacks that'll be featured, premiering in July. So, I mean, Aaron, are you interested in seeing Kirk go on the big screen?
I'm interested. I'm dreading it. I'm dreading it, but I'm definitely interested in it. The first season of the Quarterback series, showed Marcus Mariota. It was like, all right, cool, man. And now you get to see the Kirk Cousins drama, if you want to call it that, from this past season, probably from Kirk's perspective on that. So I'm very curious to see how it all plays out. And, is it a good look for the Atlanta Falcons, a bad look for the Atlanta Falcons, a good look for Kirk Cousins, a bad look for Kirk Cousins? So I'm interested, but I am definitely dreading, these situations. All I ask for the Atlanta Falcons is to not embarrass me on national television. Whenever they get a primetime game, they seem to forget that cardinal rule number one, and having, cameras in the building does not fill me with, hope and joy and whatnot. So, everybody's going to be watching this thing, millions of people. So it's like, all right, here we go.
Free. This is going to be amazing. This is going to be wonderful. This is going to be Kirk Cousins is going to have his debut. Oh, man, again, what I'm saying? On TV. He got all the attention in the world, man. We know Kirk gonna love the attention, baby. It's all on me. Look at me, Super Bowl week. I was hurt. Good old, man. We were 6-3, baby. Come on, what are we talking about here? But seriously though, I am so interested to see how Kirk acts when he's benched. That's the only episode I'm gonna be looking forward to, right? Because I think a lot of people. I'm messing with Kirk, right? I actually like the guy, and I still like the guy as a person, right? Yeah. I don't have any issues with what he did, how he did. Like, the man is looking out for himself, and the Falcons as an organization looked out for themselves when they drafted Michael Penix after they gave him $100 million in guaranteed bread. So, hey, that's how this is a business. He's operating in that way. So I think this is going to be, I'm getting my popcorn ready. This is going to be, I'm having my popcorn ready, and I can't wait to see roughly around week 16 when allegedly these injuries came about. I want to see, what did they catch? Like, who did they catch Kirk in a conversation with the trainer? And you know what could potentially happen that would make me upset about this whole thing? Mm-hmm. That he had a sidebar conversation like, yeah, man, go ahead and take my name off the injury report, bro. I'm hurt, but go ahead and take it off because I ain't trying to give him my starting spot.
You think we're really going to see that?
I mean, it's like it's Netflix, baby. Like, they want as many eyeballs on that thing as possible. So guess what? Because you know what? Because Peyton Manning and Patrick Mahomes are like EPs on this thing. So because they're quarterbacks, they probably don't want their boy out there in the streets like that. They probably take it out. But oh my God, I would not be surprised if there is something out there that could be damning for the Falcons. And we know how the league is when it comes to the Falcons. If they saying they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, the Falcons, the league gonna find out about it, and they're gonna make sure they find those cats. So yeah. Thankfully, it'll be after the draft. So whatever happens in 2026 happens in 2026.
Right. And I was thinking about that too. Like, if anything, it might be like a slight slip, if you will, that somehow someone didn't figure out, and it didn't hit the cutting room table or the cutting room floor like it should have. I could kind of see something like that happening. But on the same token, let's think about this. Peyton Manning's really, really careful dude. So sure. I'm not sure if he's going to allow anything that might put himself in a precarious situation or position with the league. So it may not even be about the Falcons or Kirk Cousins. It may be more about Peyton Manning and making sure that he's allowed to continue to be the Peyton Manning we're seeing in Act 2, where he's doing everything in a broadcast or entertainment space. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, I would probably watch it just to kind of see. Also, I know you said week 16. I would be interested also in seeing like a week 1 too, because remember how we were also questioning everything we saw out of him in week 1, like, this ain't what we signed up for. That's not what we thought. So I don't know. That's kind of the week that I'd be looking for as well. But then again, I don't know, because I mean, if he's with the Steelers, would I really want to know any of that? Do I really want to see any of that?
Well, I think that another factor that will be interesting to see how much they show in this series is like the relationship between him and Michael Penix, right?
That's a good one.
We might get a couple of glimpses of Michael Penix behind the scenes in addition to that, and that will be right in time, right before training camp. So, that could give him a bump as well in the eyes of a lot of people. It potentially hurt him in the eyes if they cut it a certain way. If Kirk gets his input into the editing process and be like, tear this guy down as much as possible. I don't know, but I don't think Kirk's that petty as Jarvis. But like,
he's not petty.
He's petty, but I don't know if he's that petty.
Yeah. You know what? That's a good call, Aaron. Like, I think at the beginning of the season, we thought he's not petty. And then midway through the season, and definitely after the season, we thought, okay, he might be a little petty, but maybe he's not that petty. Because that's a lot of petty for you to try to put somebody else in a bad light in order for you to be in a good light. But hey, look, it's business, never personal. So you never quite know what we might see. Like I said, I think we all agree that on some level, maybe not the full season of the Netflix show, but on some level, we'll peek in to kind of see if we get any breadcrumbs or any tea leaf readings to figure out what the heck really happened with Kirk Cousins last season. Thanks to every Dayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked on Falcons with your host, Aaron Freeman, as your second listen. And of course, check out our guy, Jarvis, who is a frequent contributor for Locked on Falcons as well. We will see you next time.